As they say in Georgia, hey y'all.
Hey, what's up?
We're so happy to be with you for 3D.
Hey, we'd rather be there in person, obviously, but we're glad to at least be able to do a video. And you guys are going to be talking about fruits of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be talking specifically about gentleness and self-control. Now, when we think about gentleness, I have this picture that comes to my mind, and it's from one of the King Kong movies, and it's King Kong holding a woman in his hand, and he could just squish her like a bug, and he doesn't do that. He is gentle with her. So we're talking about that. Gentleness is strength, under control and being gentle with something or someone. So we talk about the fruit of the Spirit, gentleness. We're talking about the Holy Spirit in our lives through Jesus enabling us to be gentle when we want to be harsh, right? So instead of harshness, we want to display gentleness. And that makes us think of some other pictures of gentleness.
Yeah, like King Kong holding the girl in his hand, or an adult who's holding a baby. You have to hold a baby very tenderly, very gently, because a baby is fragile. King Kong could squash that girl like a bug, but he doesn't. He holds her gently in his hand. Those are really good visual pictures of what gentleness is.
And we have some good pictures in the Bible, too, of gentleness.
Yes, there's a story of Jesus, God's Son, and a woman is thrown at his feet because she's been caught in adultery. And in that day and time, the law was that if you were caught in adultery, they took stones and they threw them at you and killed you. And so Jesus is looking at this woman, and these men are accusing her of adultery.
Basically, they're trying to trap Jesus.
Right.
And they're using the woman.
Right.
The man is not even there. They're using the woman to get to Jesus. So they don't really care about the woman. They don't really care about what she's done. They just care about trapping Jesus. So she's just a pawn in their scheme.
But Jesus doesn't say anything. He kneels down and he begins to write in the dirt. And as he writes in the dirt, he says, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." And the men standing there were watching as Jesus was writing whatever he was writing. We don't know what it was. But it was something that each of those men realized they could not throw a stone.
So beginning with the oldest ones,
to the youngest,
they all left.
They left. And Jesus looked down at the woman and he said, "Woman, where are your accusers?" And she said, "I have none." And Jesus picked her up off the ground and he said, "I don't accuse you either. Go and sin no more."
That's a picture of gentleness.
Yes.
When the tendency would be to be harsh, to instead take your strength under control with respect to the other person.
But what I love about that is that shows us how God is with us.
That's right.
When we mess up, he wants us to know that he loves us.
That's right. Because we have all sinned, and the law says we should die. And God has a full right, and Jesus had full right to allow the woman to be stoned, or even to stone her himself. But he didn't do that. What he did was, he did the same thing that God does with us, and that is he shows his mercy and his grace towards us. And he is gentle with us, like a father or mother with their child. He is gentle with us, and he doesn't give us what we deserve. He gives us, in fact, what we don't deserve.
Which is
forgiveness. And he exercises, again, gentleness with us. So God, essentially, he could just, a lot of people's picture of God is like, God's just sitting up there with a big hammer just ready to smash us, right? But he doesn't do that. In fact, he took the payment for our sin, and he has now exercised this great gentleness towards us, and he calls us to do the same thing. So we are, in order to display the character of Jesus and be like God, when we, rather than being harsh to people or gentle to them, we are being like God is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, gentleness, it's hard to think of gentleness without thinking also of self-control, because self-control and gentleness really are very related, I think. Because in order to be gentle, you have to exercise self-control, because a lot of times something happens and you want to react and you want to be harsh, you want to criticize, you want to hurl insults at somebody when they yell at you, and somebody honks the horn at you, you want to honk the horn back or whatever. But instead of doing that, we want to exercise self-control.
When I think of self-control, I think of M&M's. I have no self-control.
Hey, can I have one? Can I have?
No.
Oh, come on. Where are all the M&Ms?
Another way you
so
can
somebody
think about,
didn't exercise self-control. Somebody ate all of the M&Ms.
So another way self-control, I think of self-control, is when it's Christmas or your birthday and there's a gift that's wrapped and it's wrapped for days and you can't stand it. You want to know what's in it. It's just so hard to wait.
So let's don't wait. No.
Stay away from that.
Okay. So self-control
Yeah.
makes us think of many stories in the Bible too. Mm-hmm. One in particular, we were talking about this. I was thinking about a story about King David from the Old Testament book of 1 Samuel. So if you went to 1 Samuel chapter 24, you would read this story. David was the second king of Israel, but he was anointed to become king while the first king was still basically in power, and his name was Saul, and he was not a very good king. In fact, Saul had tried to kill David, and David had to flee for his life. David knew that he would become king because God had promised he would be the next king, and Saul knew that David was going to become king, but Saul didn't like God's plan. He rejected God's plan, and he wasn't going along with it. He's pursuing David, and they end up in this mountain area. David and his men end up back in this cave. Saul goes in to use the restroom, or as it says, to relieve himself. That's what the text says. So says that David and his men realized he was in the cave. David was encouraged by his men to basically go and kill Saul. And what David did, he snuck up and cut off a corner of his robe, and obviously could have just cut off his head or whatever.
But he used self-control.
Yes, he used self-control. He did not kill King Saul, even though God had promised he would be the next king, and for him to become king, Saul was going to have to be removed as king. David did not take it on himself to do that. He exercised instead self-control.
Because he was going to let God take care of Saul.
He was going to let God take it. So he said basically, you know, Saul is God's anointed. God is the one who has the right to take Saul and do whatever he wants with him. I'm not going to stand in the place of God. So he exercised self-control.
Yeah, and really that's a better story.
It is.
Because, I mean, when David's grandkids came to him and said, "Grandfather, tell us when you killed Saul," and he told them that, well, Saul was going to the bathroom and I snuck up behind him and I stabbed him in the back.
Or cut off his head. While he was...
That wouldn't have been a good story.
Yeah, that's not a good story. Yeah.
That would have been bad.
So, you know, the same thing is true about us. There's a lot of times, I don't know, I got things I could say, and I'm sure you do, Elise, and I'm sure you could too. There are times where I didn't exercise self-control and the story didn't turn out real good, and those are not the stories that I like to tell people. So
it makes me think of Corrie Ten Boom in The Hiding Place, which is an autobiography. She was in a German concentration camp in World War II, and her sister actually died in the camp. And after it was over, Corrie went around sharing about God's faithfulness to her and her sister throughout the camp, throughout the time that they were in the camp. And she was talking to a group in Germany, and when it was over, one of the guards that had been particularly cruel to her and her sister came up to talk to her. And initially, Corrie was taken aback, and she wanted to run, and she wanted to be angry with him. But in her mind, she said, Lord, please help me. I need help. I need to love this man the way you do. And the man reached out his hand and he said, I'm so thankful for the forgiveness of God. And Corrie reached out and took his hand. And when she did, God gave her a love for him that she did not realize that she could have. And that's really what the fruit of the Spirit is all about. The fruit of the Spirit, we all can exhibit peace and love and joy.
To a degree,
and
right.
goodness and kindness and gentleness and self-control. But when we have a relationship with Jesus and he puts his Spirit in us, we can do things that we never dreamed were possible to do. Things that are way against what we would normally do. And that's how it was for Corrie in this situation. And it makes me think of my favorite verses, which are 2 Corinthians 12, 9, and 10. And in it, Paul is struggling because he's in pain. He's got a pain in his side, and he's begging God to take it away. And God says, no, my grace is sufficient for you because my power is perfect in your weakness. And throughout my life, there have been so many times that I've been weak. And I've said, Lord, I can't do this, but I'm asking you to do it through me. And God does. And so we just want to encourage you guys that when you have a relationship with Jesus, he changes you from the inside out. You're not perfect. You don't get it right every time. But he has his Spirit that's there. It's available for you to help you to move beyond.
And his Spirit gives us an inner strength to do things we wouldn't normally do. So when we talk about...
Like forgive.
Yes. When we talk about fruits of the Spirit, we're talking about doing things that go against the natural tendency. Our natural tendency, when we get attacked, is to what? Attack.
Attack back.
When somebody comes after us, we want to react. And so if we are exhibiting the fruit of the Spirit, we're not going to react. We're going to respond. When people are ugly and harsh with us, we're going to respond gently. When people lash out at us, and when we are in full right, people would say we were in full right to get revenge, for example, or to get back at people. We're not going to do that. We're going to exercise self-control. When people are, I think of people at the stop sign honking horns and, all kinds of flipping birds at you and stuff like that. And you're just,
That's American.
You exercise self-control. So
we love you guys, and we hope you have a wonderful camp.